Let me ask you a question. Are these figures affected by adding an additional 30 public safety employees now?
Yes.
I don't understand why we're going to do that then. I mean, if we raise the amount of money that we're going to have to cut by adding new employees now, it seems to me, and then are we going to exempt those same groups from cuts again, and then we're going to cut deeper then into
So Jim, when we use the use tax for the buffer and to create the new positions that we're talking about, when does the use tax money run out, and when does the general fund take on those positions? Really, I think that's the discussion we're having. We could have the use tax continue to pay them, but at some point, we know that that's fundamentally not sound finances.
Well, it just seems to me, though, that if we add employees, and wherever we pay it from, whatever source the fund is, we add 30 people, then when we look forward to next fiscal year, and we know that next fiscal year is going to take we're going to have a 12% across the board cut, we have escalated the amount of the cut we're going to have to take by adding new people to have to cut from.
You are correct.
And if we say, well, the public safety is exempt from all this, that means you're going to have to cut guys that are out there fixing that water break that we saw today, and the roads that are just, this storm has just ruined practically. I mean, in the rural areas, the roads are just gone almost. I think the idea of, if we've already gone past the idea of adding 30 public safety people, I'd like to go back there, and I'd like to have a discussion about whether that makes any economic sense to do that or not.
I think that's
I think that's the discussion we are going to have going forward as far as looking at the 2011 budget.
I mean, it's not that we don't.
You also keep in mind we have not negotiated our labor contracts going forward.
You know, we'd all like to have more police officers, and we'd all like to have more firefighters, and we'd all like to have, but to reward one area over all the other functions of the city, and then cause that to have to make a more sizable cut than in next fiscal year, just seems to me unwise. Financially, fiscally, it's unwise, and I'm not sure it's fair. And when you look at what all people,
if we didn't spend that use tax money on additional public safety officers, we wouldn't have to cut animal welfare officers, zoning officers, and we could use that use tax money in other areas to get through this period. But by committing to hire additional officers, we've eliminated that.
Or you could save money in the fund balance. You could have a higher fund balance going in, which could then fund some of this 12% that we're talking about next year, because you wouldn't have as high a number that you had to reach and have more money to reach it with, and you'd have the use tax free to do that. Yeah. I mean, the commitments that we talked about back 3 or 4 months ago were, in my view, were contingent. Were a couple of things. We weren't as deep in as we are now. It's like, this is kind of like. Well, I'm not going to use that to illustrate it. Anyway, it gets worse. It gets worse. And so we're now 3 or 4 months into it worse than it was before. And now we're looking at longer periods before we get out of it as we were before. And I just think that's not a good idea. I mean, I personally, as much as I'd like to add a rural road paving program. I invite y'all out to my house and see what's left of the road in front of my house, you'd probably join me. But I don't think that's good financial management to add employees anywhere at a time when we are projecting further deficits. I think we're all going to have to tighten our belts and figure out how to get through this without. And I just think that's a bad idea.
The annual cost for those 30 additional officers is slightly under $3 million.
And if we left that $3 million, that's about what we're talking about taking out of the fund balance. And if we left that money, we wouldn't have to make 12% cuts next year if all these projections come out.
Well, keep in mind, though, Pete, the use tax is still an available option to us, and we have not negotiated our union contracts for next fiscal year. Both of those are discretionary, if not negotiable, factors to consider in your discussion.
Yeah.
But what we're burying the lead here, because we're doing what we said we're going to do. And what we said during the campaign is something we need to follow through on.
Well, I don't agree with that. I respectfully disagree with that. We offered to do that in an effort to resolve a problem. They rejected that offer. That's like having a dysfunctional family and your child says, I want a car, and they come home and go crazy, and then you buy them the car. I mean, that isn't how it works. That's not how life works. That's not how finance works. I mean, I personally don't feel like I've made a commitment as a council member to do that. And I certainly don't think I made a commitment to do that to the extent it's going to impact next fiscal year's budget for all these folks sitting out there and all the other 3,000 people that are not sitting out there.
Well, you don't know that it will.
Well,
Larry?
Well, it'll be worse probably. If things don't get better soon, it's going to be worse than that.
Well, just very briefly, without getting too far down the road, obviously we have a finite amount of money that we have to spend, and we can only spend that amount of money. And we need to prioritize how we spend that money. And for me, the priority has to go to public safety. And I think the results that we've had in the past have shown that public safety needs more uniformed officers out in the street doing the public service work that they're called to do. And so I don't see it as a reward. I see it as a coming up to what we need to do in order to provide the level of service that our citizens expect based on their priorities that they've espoused in the past.
Yeah, Brian?
Well, I'll just throw my 2 cents in here. The offer was made to public safety to get their endorsement of MAPS 3. They rejected that. But the campaign at that point continued to be that there was going to be additional officers and firefighters. So I would have to agree with the mayor that the campaign was run that there will be additional police officers and firefighters. And at that point, when that statement is made to the public, and as close as it was, there's probably people who made their vote based on that. At that point, all that other stuff goes out the window about what happened before. That's the offer that was made to the public, that if they passed it, that's what we would do. And so, to me, there is no choice, because if we don't do that, then we're going back on the promise that was made during the campaign.
Well,
the council never made that promise, though.
I didn't make that promise.
Campaign made the promise. Let the campaign pay for it.
That's right.
So do you want to throw him out there to the wolves?
That wasn't the deal either. That wasn't the deal. The offer was made not to about opposition to MAPS 3, to settle this goofy thing we've got going on with the arbitration with our last year's contract. That was all part of one deal. They rejected all that.
Well, all of that doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is the promise, whether it was this council or whether
I
it was
didn't make it. I'm not bad. You're not going to get on my conscience about it, because I didn't make it.
Well,
I wasn't in favor of it, and I'm not in favor of it now.
What the voters heard
and neither is Pat.
What the voters heard was
so it's
that if they voted yes, that they would get 30 additional uniformed people. And if they don't
Brian,
get it,
you're not one to be telling me what the voters thought. I mean, you were on the wrong side of that deal in the first place.
Not based on the graph that we got back from our boards, but
I just don't want to go beyond this. I mean, we're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to do it in a collegial way. At the end of the day, we're going to do it. But but I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to punish the rest of the 3,000 people that work for Oklahoma City and give that kind of deference. I just think it's wrong.
Well, I still think that's discretionary when you consider the use tax is available and the fact that the union contract's about negotiated for it. So you're jumping to conclusions there.
I'm not saying it's illegal.
Here's where I think fundamentally what we have to consider is listening to what they've said, and I'm generalizing here. We've got 2006 revenue and 2009 salaries, and our expenses are salary driven. And so if our revenue is not at 2009 levels, then our salaries can't be at 2009 levels, or the budget's not going to meet. Pretty simple in that respect. Now, the use tax is kind of an X factor that we can toss in there and certainly use it now under these extreme emergency circumstances, which I feel like we're in from a revenue standpoint. But going forward, we're going to have some decisions going ahead, and our unions are going to have to work with us, because as we heard for the last few months, staffing is very, very important to them, as it is to the citizens and as it is to this council. I don't think we're going to reach any conclusions today. I think this has been a worthwhile discussion, but we probably ought to go ahead with the budget presentation.